Folks, it's Saturday, it's Scotland, it's 1 p.m, and we're back in original form, the legible, credible, inevitable storm, which is a force for good, coming to you live from our nerve centre here in the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. And this is a special broadcast because this is our 30th consecutive Saturday street stall, which is amazing to say that we've been doing this now for 30 weeks. So welcome to the 30th Unionist biography of the A to the double F to the G. AFFG, a force for good, Scotland's premier campaign group and pro-union think tank. Good to see Sean. Ben sending them some flags. Hope you're well. Ben, hope the work is good for you. Alan says afternoon from Greenock. And Sandra says hello. Good to see you on, Sandra. Excellent, excellent stuff. Jamie sends some flags there, and Mary says hello from Lanark. Alan, good to see you. So many British patriots watching today, and it's going to be a very patriotic broadcast, there's no doubt. And from a unionist perspective, there are one or two things that are concerning us, and we're going to get straight into the Welsh border apparent shutdown and what on earth is going on there, because as a unionist, as pro-union, we believe fundamentally in the right of us all to travel from north to south, from east to west, from Shetland to the Scillies, and from the furthest eastern point at Lowestoft to the furthest western point in Bilic in County Fermanagh. It should be freedom of movement for all British citizens in that regard. So when some jumped up local panjandrum takes it upon him or herself to essentially close the border, then we have got a problem with the way that devolution is structured and the way that the United Kingdom is going. Raymond says hello. Alan says good afternoon, good to see you. And Tommy from Loyal Coat Bridge, good. And Dougie from the Kingdom of Fife. Indeed. So firstly, let's consider the situation in Wales and why on earth they would want to lock it down. Now, Alison Pearson, who is a journalist that we massively respect on this particular matter, she is from Wales, and she was writing in the Daily Telegraph, and she said, consider for one moment this. Just over 3 million people live in Wales. 400 of those people were in hospital, confirmed COVID-19 patients, and only 32 poor souls bad enough to be on ventilators. At the height of the pandemic, it was around 150. So this, she says, she goes on, this is not an out of control blaze that demands a firebreak. A few well-targeted sandbags would do. Yet last Friday, Public Health Wales, which has a combined, in Pembrokeshire, which has a combined population of almost 400,000, there were only 25 new cases of this coronavirus. In Pembrokeshire and Carry-On came in at 18, not deaths, but cases. So these are very, very small numbers. And she says, I'd argue there is currently more chance of perishing in a sheep-related incident than of succumbing to COVID in West Wales. Well, indeed, that is the case. And the Daily Telegraph was equally puzzled as well in its editorial. And it said, supporters talk fancifully of eradicating the disease, something that would only be achievable by locking down until it has gone and then cutting Wales off from the rest of the United Kingdom. Is that the plan? If not, what is the plan? I can sum up the plan. The plan is the promotion of a nationalist consciousness. Whether you are Nicola Sturgeon or whether you are Mark Dreyfurt, who has not played Cymru, he's Wales, but he's appealing to a nationalist consciousness in order to get votes. if you're either of these two people, then you appeal to the nationalist consciousness and you do whatever you can to make it seem that it's only confined to your little area of the United Kingdom, and you are going to big up yourself and any powers that you get in order to promote your nationalist point of view. So it's taking advantage of the situation to exploit it for your own political gain. That's what's happening, whether it's Nicola Sturgeon or whether it's the Mark Drakeford character that none of us had ever heard of until about 10 days ago. Ray says, good afternoon. And James watching from Toronto, good to see you here, James. Excellent. A loyal part of the Queen's Commonwealth. Well, we know you, James, are one of Canada's most loyal Brits. I know that, and we've had the pleasure of interviewing you, which a couple of interviews on our YouTube channel a couple of years ago now. Still get good views on that. Kenny, is Sturgeon going to ban buying alcohol next in the shops? Watch this space. Do you know, Kenny, it could well be, that could well be a possibility. Anything to seem different. You know, apparently England has got 3 levels of lockdown. Yesterday, Nicola Sturgeon introduced 5 levels in Scotland. And of course, she did it simply because she could, and to be different, to make it sound different. Donovan from New Brunswick in Canada. Good to see you watching in, Donovan. I hope things are good there in British Canada, as we love to call it, and we have family out in British Canada as well. God bless them all. So it's a nationalist point that Drakeford is trying to make, and we were extremely disturbed last night to read a report on Wales Online that police are actually now stopping people travelling from England into Wales. Now, the most remarkable thing about this is that it's police on both sides of this so-called border. So it's Gloucester police acting in alliance with the police on the Gwent and Welsh side of the border. And why on earth, how on earth would that happen? Why on earth would the police on the English side be involved in helping to promote Mark Drakeford's policies in Wales? That's completely mystifying. So we contacted one of our colleagues in Wales to ask what his opinion is, and I'll give that to you in a moment. John says, good afternoon, Alistair. Good to hear from you, John. Glad you're there, keeping well. Tommy says hi. Hope you're well. I am, Tommy. Hope you are too. And Rick says, Rule Britannia, God bless you all. Keep up the good work. We always will keep up the good work, Rick, that's for sure. So basically, we put out this last night on our Facebook page, and we said that freedom of movement between all parts of the United Kingdom is surely a basic fundamental of national unity, as well as a natural right of British citizenship. So if devolved assemblies can get away with essentially closing down the border, then do we even have a United Kingdom anymore? And we went on and we said, what these actions by these power-mad assembly leaders are demonstrating is that the COVID situation is revealing a destruction of the United Kingdom in law, which has gone much further than many of us had hitherto realised. Because if somebody in Edinburgh or somebody in Cardiff can close the border with their particular area of the United Kingdom, then that's essentially a border. That's essentially a form of hard border. Now, that should not be allowed. And devolution should not have created a situation where that was allowed, certainly not in that nationalistic context. It seems just appalling to us, and it just shows the extent to which important things have gone by the wayside until issues like this bring it out and just reveals how much power these devolved assemblies, which, let's remember, were meant to keep the United Kingdom together, how much power they have. Now, just a little mention on that. Yeah, we've put that we're going to speak about an article, a fantastic article in the Daily Telegraph in a moment, and we've put the link up there. Now, basically, if what that's revealed just is that it's gone much further. Now, devolution could theoretically work when everybody's on side. For example, if you had a Tory government in the British Parliament, a Tory-controlled one in Labour in Wales, or one in Scotland, then they would all agree with the central government. But when you literally have the opponents of the particular government in power in Westminster, in power in Wales, and also another version in power up in Scotland, then you're going to get nothing but chaos and just drama. It stands to reason. So, and all that happens then is it pulls the areas apart. So that's one of the bad things about devolution, is when you have really aggressive people in their little areas that are really using whatever powers they can against the centre. At the end of the day, the overall national unity is going to be stretched, but it can be repaired. It can be repaired, but it's obviously a bad thing at the moment. Now, this was pointed out in a very good article, which we put up there. The UK's borders must not be the plaything of angry nationalist politicians. Such a perfect headline, and it appeared in the Daily Telegraph by Matt Kilcoyne on the 15th. And he says, he puts it well, he goes, Welsh First Minister Drakeford has taken the resurgence of COVID, alleged resurgence, as his chance to play a latter-day Owen Glendower, leading a revolt against the English and shutting the border. He was quickly supported on public health grounds, of course, by that staunch Unionist Nicola Sturgeon, who is so keen on diffusing the idea of a border on the island of Great Britain that she sees a chance to do so via the pandemic. It's often the Tories who are accused of threatening the Union, but frankly, I'm sick of this. What threatens the United Kingdom are nationalists of all stripes pulling on the fabric of our constitution. And he points out that, interestingly, policing is not a devolved matter. Okay, so policing is not actually a matter for Mark Drakeford, because policing sees the kingdom, as he puts it, of England and Wales is a single jurisdiction. And so Drakeford does not have the authority to remove the rights of British people to travel throughout this kingdom. Our shared land is part of the reason we have a shared and sovereign parliament. He goes on, I've seen for decades how devolution has put up subtle borders where there were none. Now it has driven identity politics and has been a constant drip towards fractured independence. This action by the First Minister of Wales should be a final straw for my countrymen. No more. Antagonistic devolution has imperiled our union, sets Britain against Britain, and raises the possibility of borders in our shared island to the benefit of only a narrow set of angry nationalists. As a Welshman, I am furious at the man who says he speaks for us all. We're part of the British people, and we do not want to see our country or our islands broken up. Drakeford must be told that this power grab cannot and will not be tolerated. Amen to that. Amen to that. A force for good could not have put that any better. Now, Boris Johnson, what are you going to do about it? And what on earth are we going to do about the Gloucester police collaborating to stop English people from England travelling into another part of the kingdom? What are they going to do about that? And why are they even doing it? I'll get onto that in a minute. Hi, Mark. Hi, Elizabeth says, spot on. Paul asks, is policing devolved in Scotland? Yes, Paul, policing is devolved in Scotland. In fact, we have something called Police Scotland. What we used to have was lots of separate local police forces. But just prior to the 2014 referendum, Alex Salmond centralised it all, because he knew that if there was going to be a victory for the separatists, then everybody was going to flip the lid. So he knew that he had to get in control of all the police forces throughout Scotland prior to 2014. So he centralised them under something called Police Scotland, which is now a pyramidal structure with the First Minister at the top directly in control. Whereas in the past, prior to 2014, it was lots of different little areas, little constabularies with their own local council heads and so on and so forth. So the centralisation of the police was done deliberately by Alex Salmond prior to the referendum in order to ensure that he would be in charge, come what may. So it's now in danger of being a highly politicised police force. I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying it's very much in danger of that and being accused of being that. Sandra says, no more powers to the devolved assemblies. Abolish them. They're a monumental waste of money. And thanks for the comments coming in on YouTube. Stephen says the anti-UK Plaid Cymru and SNP will use any situation to leverage apart the UK. That's so true, Stephen. Thanks for your comments there. Richard says Boris talks well but is weak and has a lot on his plate. That's for sure. The Tories should have got stuck in years ago. Christopher says the Police Scotland centralisation was a key political act. We won't even mention the VAT fiasco that Salmond and co created in the police and fire services. And Jonathan wonders why Boris hasn't used his majority better. Well, indeed, because with an 80-seat majority, you can basically create a revolution if you wanted, if you had the ideology. Maybe that's what's lacking. Maybe there's just not the ideology. I know a lot of people think there's very little difference between some of these parties these days. We're talking about a difference and talking, if you want to do something about the Welsh Assembly, there will be a party, we believe, standing in Wales next May called Abolish, the Welsh Assembly Party. Now that will be standing, we believe, on the regional list, and that very much does what it says on the tin. So if there's people out there in Wales who have had enough of this nonsense and want to push back against Drakeford in a very obvious way, then why don't you elect some Abolish the Welsh Assembly candidates to Parliament? And that reminds me, I think there's also a party in Scotland that's going to be standing under that banner as well, called Abolish the Scottish Parliament Party. And I need to check up on that. It's probably got a website, but that's Abolish the Scottish Parliament Party. I think there's also going to be that standing. So certainly next year, there will be the opportunity for people to really vote strongly against these devolved assemblies. And that'll be interesting to see how many people actually support that point of view. Stephen says, I'm ex-army, lots of Welsh friends. We all agree that being in the UK actually promotes our countries and gives us a platform to be even more Welsh, Scottish, English, and Northern Irish. Neil says, great viewing as always. And James says, devolution has failed, get rid of it. Well, yeah, absolutely. The only way to do that, of course, is to vote for people who want to get rid of it. And as we've just said, there will be those candidates in some of the regions anyway, in Scotland, if not in all the regions in Wales. So, you know, we just stuck up an article that we wrote there, a speech that we gave several years ago, which was called One UK, the British Union from 31st Principles. And we listed 30 principles of what it meant to have a real strong British Union. But do you know what? Of those 30 principles, we never thought to put in freedom of movement. We never thought to put in freedom of movement because that was just a given. We didn't think that was ever even going to be contested. But now it seems that we're going to actually have to explicitly say that freedom of movement from north to south, from east to west, is a fundamental right of being a British citizen and is a fundamental plank of the Union. We're going to have to actually say that so that there is no way that Sturgeon or the SNP or the Welsh or anybody can try to put up an internal border for people or even for goods in the United Kingdom. And that's, you've heard a lot about the internal market bill. Well, that's putting that into law as well. And that's one of the things, naturally enough, that these Scottish nationalists don't like, because they want Scotland, their version of Scotland, to be able to set its own standards on everything, which of course will just be different from whatever was set by companies in England, which will just make trade between Scotland and England nigh impossible. Of course, there has to be an internal economic market, and it has to be run from one place, and that has to be the central British Parliament. So there's nothing controversial about the internal market bill. It's what always used to exist prior to us joining the EU. And then when these powers came back to us, they had to go back to Westminster, not to get divvied out among the local assemblies. And there was a point that I saw here that I want to mention on this internal market bill, now that I'm talking about it. You know, this is something that before I really got involved into politics, I didn't really understand how nasty some politicians can be, in the sense of deliberately misrepresenting reality. Now, a lot of us on our side, we're very much, you know, what you see is what you get. We're very open, and we don't intend to mislead anybody deliberately. And we don't try to use any funny phrases to confuse the reality of the situation. But I've noticed that many of the people that I would regard as opponents do that all the time when they're not actually just lying. They'll make up phrases that are such a twist of the truth. It's literally a twisted. And you can only make up twisted phrases like that if you're of a twisted political mind. Anyway, this is the leader of the Scottish Greens talking about the internal market bill, somebody called Patrick Harvey. And he was talking about that he didn't want to see Westminster, blah, 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 and giving itself a veto over Scotland's democracy. Now, what he meant by that was that in the internal market bill, he's saying that Westminster is vetoing Scotland's alleged right to be able to set its own points of view on the matter. But a veto is a constitutional right to reject a decision. And the British Parliament most certainly has a constitutional right to reject something like internal market standards being set by these local assemblies. It's a constitutional right. It's not giving itself a veto. It's not pretending that it's like something that it's grabbed hold of that doesn't exist and it's abusing its power in some way. This is just the way that it is. This is just the way that it is. The British government and Parliament has the perfect right and duty and responsibility to have one internal market. It's not stealing it from anybody else. It's not grabbing power from anybody else. It's simply exercising its right to do that, which it has. And it also has a right which it's not exercising, which is to maintain freedom of movement. So it needs to get working on that as well, because how can you have an internal market if you can't have internal freedom of movement? So that's maybe something that should be written into this Internal Market Act, is the right of British citizens to move freely within their land. Anyway, folks, we're staying on YouTube, and we're really pleased at the numbers that are viewing today. Dorothea says, some people think that if you say something often enough, it becomes true. Absolutely. Absolutely. A lie is a lie, no matter how many repeat it. And that's basically if you say something often enough, regardless of what it is, that's the basis of advertising. And if all you see is, if you switch on the television and all you see is politician A, then you will move in your subconscious mind towards politician A, just in the same way that if you switched on the television and there was an advert for soap and it was the same advert for soap every single day, that's the soap that you would buy. It's just a natural thing that humans do. And people say, why is Nicola Sturgeon rising in the polls? It's because we're seeing her every single day, and the BBC is pushing her, as is the entire rotten, fake news Scottish media, which are all in hock to her and which are all complicit in perpetuating this COVID carry-on pantomime. And they're all complicit in making the economy tank, and they are all complicit in the cafes and bars and restaurants and businesses that are going out of business. And these newspapers will report stuff every day on the internet. Cafe A goes out of business in Glasgow. Cafe C goes out of business in Edinburgh. It's because your Glasgow newspapers and your Glasgow and your Edinburgh newspapers are not properly giving the opportunity to those who disagree with this and say, we shouldn't be having this lockdown in the first place. If your local newspaper did its job, it would be able to save all of these businesses and all of these closures. Okay, so it's complicit. The local newspapers are complicit in the local businesses and the local economy tanking, because they alone really have the power to turn this around. And they must start to turn it around. And we must also remember those who don't turn it around and those who keep it perpetuated, and not forget them. Okay, we're going to switch over now only to YouTube, folks. If you're on Facebook, please just click on the link. Hopefully just keep putting up that YouTube link in the comments and at the top of the page, and just click on that, and it's what we're going to be what we're going to be broadcasting now entirely on. So please just come and join us over on YouTube, because we need to get these numbers up, and we're really doing it. We're now almost at 860, and we're aiming for 1,000 by the end of the year. So we should be. Kenny says, God bless. Thank you very much, Kenny. And Greg said Britain needs more trade with Canada. I agree entirely with that. So please, folks, come and join us on YouTube. Stick up the YouTube link there in the Facebook comments, please. There it is. Click on that and keep putting that link up in throughout all the comments and under everybody else's comments, so they've got it straight away and they can come over and join us on YouTube. Thanks very much, folks. Good. Now we have to push YouTube, because that's going to be the major broadcasting system for us in the future. Now, one of the thing I want to go on to now is polls, and people have been concerned about the polling in the last 10 days. Okay, it seems that if you are to believe the polls, that the Nationalists do have a big lead. As I've said, there's reasons for Sturgeon's popularity, one of them being that's all you see on the telly is her. But other points that I do want to say about polls is that polls lead opinion as much as they reflect opinion, and they can be used to lead people in wrong directions, and to do so deliberately. And they are also deliberately engineered to create talking points for the media. And so if you want to get the people talking about a certain thing, you can create a poll which will find a percentage of the people believe something. Even if it's a minority that believe it, you simply emphasize their point of view, and that becomes the story. 10% of people think that they should walk backwards down the street, and then it suddenly becomes, should we all walk backwards down the street? And they do another poll a month later, and it's 25% of people think that's a good idea, and so it goes on. So polls can easily be used to manipulate people, believe me, easily used. So we have to always remember that when we're looking at it. We also need to remember that polls are a snapshot in time. Okay, they don't represent a fixed position, because voters are moving all the time in in relation to the information that is provided and in relation to the circumstances of the moment. So people are moving all the time in their positions. So polls don't represent a fixed point of view. However, listen carefully to the lamestream Scottish media, and you will find out that the new talking point is that this is a fixed position. Okay, so the useless Scottish media is moving to the position that this is a fixed position, when of course it's not, and they know it's not. They know it's not, but they want to promote that for their own agenda. So polls are not a reflection of a permanent position, but do be aware of the mass media trying to pretend that it is a reflection of a fixed position. So it's for us to stop any kind of defeatism. Ian says, polls are a means of dictating the media topic. Absolutely. James, good to see you. Deal with Canada to come next year. Thomas says, confusion reigns throughout Scotland because of Nicola Sturgeon. She has a lot to answer for you. So even if these polls are accurate, and the last poll said 58% of people wanted Scottish independence. Well, I looked at the questions that were asked, and the questions were extremely leading questions, absurd questions, really. So I don't put any faith in that, but let's just presume for the sake of argument that that's correct. Remember, those figures can be turned around. So what's that saying? Unionists are at 42%. Let's just presume for the sake of argument that's correct. Well, in 2014, the Scottish nationalists came from around 20% to 45%, okay? So they were away down at 20% and they ended up at 45%. So if we are away down at 42%, 25% onto that is 67. So we could easily get right back up there again. In fact, we could get right back up to being more than we were in 2014. And we've always said this at A Force for Good. You know, if there were ever, God forbid, a second referendum, we have to get more than 55% this time. We have to blow them out the water. Okay, 67% would be very nice. That would put it to bed. That would put it to bed. But if there was a second referendum and it was, 1% difference or something like that, well, that's game on for a third referendum. So we have to win the second referendum. If it happens, God forbid. But if it happens, we have to win bigly. We have to win bigly in order to put an end to it. And of course, we can do that. We can do that because there are lots of things which are not properly being articulated at the moment and which are not being emphasized. And let me give you a for instance. Really good article in the Sunday Telegraph on the 18th of October. Our union with Scotland is dying and we seem powerless to stop it. Well, that's a negative headline, a bit of a clickbait headline, but it's the points that he made which are absolutely correct. And he points out that the polls can shift, and he points out that progressive devolvement of power, far from making things better, as it was supposed to, has only made them worse. Well, we know that. And he talks about those people perhaps in the rest of the United Kingdom who are very blasé about this. He says, I don't buy the argument that it doesn't matter, that the union has run its course and must now give way to a different order. A lot of things begin to unravel once the union goes. And goodness me, he's right. We wrote an article on this, 21 reasons. No, we didn't write an article. We gave a speech, 21 reasons why the English should care about Scotland separating. And we'll put that up there in the link. And goodness me, we showed how quickly things will unravel. And he uses just a couple of examples here. He says, what ongoing justification would there be for a continued presence on the UN Security Council, or the voting power and influence it enjoys with other multilateral organizations such as WTO and IMF? Would the maintenance of a professional standing army or independent nuclear deterrent even be viable if it was just England alone? And he's right. to answer his question, is not viable, because we have also pointed out that the British unionism is the founding philosophy of the United Kingdom. And we did write an article on that, and we listed 10 points of how it is the founding philosophy of the United Kingdom. British unionism is the founding philosophy of the United Kingdom. And so many people don't realize that. They think that if Scotland broke away, that somehow there's going to be a United Kingdom between England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. No, there's not. All of these places will immediately fall away, and you will have 4 separate countries, and the United Kingdom will have gone to hell in a handbasket. So the union is, and particularly the Scotland-England Union, is the founding philosophy of the United Kingdom. And since then, of course, we've had the Irish Union as well on top of that. And Wales and England have always been joined in some way since going right back to the Tudor times, if not before. So yeah, the union is the founding philosophy of the United Kingdom. And so one of the ways of rebirthing it is for that position to begin to be articulated, a position which has been hitherto unheard of, except from our think tank here in Glasgow, A Force for Good. So we wrote to Mr. Warner, who was the person here, and we sent him a copy of our wee book, which is a tremendous little thing. It's only £5. You can get that from our shop. We sent him a copy of this, which is a great wee story about the union. And we also sent him a copy of our magazine Union Heart, which has in the center pages what I've just been talking about, the British Union, and how it is the ideology underpinning Britain. So we sent this to him. If anybody wants this, by the way, if you become a union supporter, donating a small amount each month, then we'll put you on the mailing list for our Union Heart, and we'll also automatically send you all the back issues as well. There's the link up there to become a monthly union supporter. So we wrote to Mr. Warner and we said, you make some good points, and I'm bringing our organisation to your attention. We are Scotland's premier pro-union campaign group and think tank. We're non-party, and we were established in 2012. As you imply at the end of your article, the breakup of the Union would be the death of the United Kingdom. The notion that England, Wales and Northern Ireland could continue as some sort of remaining quote-unquote United Kingdom is simply not a viable proposition. Yet it seems to us that our politicians don't grasp that obvious fact. This is about the very survival of the country that we know today as the United Kingdom. Maybe when politicians wake up to this fact, then things might change. And then we went on pointing him to some of our material out there, including our latest article, which is that Holyrood does not have a mandate for a second independence referendum. And even if it won a majority of seats, that would not give it a mandate for a second referendum, because that mandate, our mandate for unity, is held at the British Parliament level. And so it is at that level that engages all of the 4 corners of the United Kingdom. And it is at that level, it is seeking a mandate at that level that the separatists will have to attempt. And that's a much harder thing for them to do, because it requires them to stand as abstentionists. And, you know, articulating this sort of thing needs somebody that's strong enough to do it. You can't just have some guy blustering away about it. You need to know what you're talking about on these matters. And we have to pray that someone will arise in the political world, and we will do our best to teach them about these things as well. And that's, you can see our article, Holyrood, no mandate for indie. That's the first article that's up at the top of our website at this moment. We'll put up the link to that. There you go, it's already up there. And then Ian even talks there, he says, think about the custody of the waterways if the UK splits 4 ways. Well, yeah, the waterways used to be, I believe, nationalised, and it was British waterways that controlled all the canals and so on and so forth, which is how it should be. But then devolution devolved it. So now the canals in Scotland are owned by something with like trite name like Scottish Canals or Canals Scotland, probably Canals Scotland, that's what it will be called. But the Falkirk wheel, that big massive piece of engineering, that was made under British waterways, not under Canals Scotland. Anyway, don't want to be too hard on Canals Scotland. They opened a stretch of canal about 2 or 3 years ago called the Queen Elizabeth II Canal. So we have to thank them for that. And that was the day when we took this fantastic photograph of the Kelpies and the Union Jacks, which is an iconic Unionist photograph now. So I wanted to talk today about social media, but we're kind of running out of time because we always finish at 2 o'clock after I've given our Week in British History. But let me just say a couple of things on this so I can just get this down as a marker. I do believe that prior to this election on the 3rd of November in America, that Facebook and Twitter have overreached their hand, undoubtedly, and they have set their own demise on path. Because, as you know, we were removed from Twitter. We can't access our 30,000 people who follow us on Twitter. So if you can do that, please, if you're on Twitter, please share the links to our articles. Please share the links to our videos, because we can't do that anymore. We can't go onto Twitter, and we can't set up another AFFG Twitter account because that would cause us to be banned. So we just have to like lump our suspension. Unfortunately, we can't broadcast at all. So if you think we're producing good stuff, and if you're on Twitter, please do put out our articles. Please do put out our videos, and we're producing five videos a week now, which is astonishing. We take this video and we cut it into smaller bits, and we put it on our Instagram and our Facebook and on Parler as well. So please share our stuff on Twitter if you can do that. TC says, well said, Silicon Valley are evil. Yes, and well, I'm going to tell you something that just blew my mind. I think it's bad enough that a force for good with our 30,000 followers has been removed from Twitter, but Twitter has stopped the New York Post, a national American newspaper, from posting. It's still suspended from posting for the last 10 days because 10 days ago it put out a story about Hunter Biden, who is the son of Joe Biden, and it wasn't a complimentary story, and it reflected badly on Joe Biden. So Twitter said, we are going to stop you posting until you remove that post. And at the moment, this morning, New York Post is still standing firm and is not removing the post, and they're still effectively banned from posting on Twitter. So, you know, they talk about Russian bots or Chinese bots influencing the American election. Twitter and Facebook are doing it in broad daylight in front of our eyes. I'll give you another example. Last night, the biggest pro-Trump meme page. Now, memes are jokes and graphics, usually jokes in graphic form that go out and they go viral. And it's quite an amusing, but it's quite an irreverent page. It's called God Emperor Trump. God Emperor Trump has got 350,000 followers. It's the biggest pro-Trump meme page. Guess what Facebook did to it last night? Took it down. 10 days out from the election. Took it down, cancelled it. Is not there anymore. And that's a page that had 350,000 pro-Trump young people mainly following it, and Facebook have just cancelled it. Now, this sort of thing cannot go on. This is deliberate messing around with, deliberate interference in the political system, in the political process. So what has to happen if Trump gets elected is he has to get some kind of anti-monopoly and mergers commission in there and break up these companies, because they have gone too far now. They cannot be abusing their power in this way for these political purposes. They cannot be doing that. It's not right. And I don't know why he didn't do it in the last 4 years, but now there is no excuse for doing it. Now, if Biden wins, then we're all kind of lost, basically, because all small c conservative voices will be removed entirely from social media, and certainly from Facebook and Twitter. So we have to be conscious of that. But if Trump wins, he has to get this sorted. And here in the United Kingdom, Boris also has to get it sorted, because this fantastic wee book, which I'm now halfway through, and I endorse it 100%. We'll put the link up there to it. He points out that the damage that a political movement sustains when its grassroots is deplatformed is enormous. In an election year, it's even more important, because such accounts serve as network hubs for a larger movement. The movement uses retweets from this hub to find new accounts to follow, and it can also serve as a source of news, information, and action alerts for activists. When that suddenly disappears, the ability of the movement to organize takes a massive hit. And we took a massive hit. Unionism in Scotland took a massive hit when Twitter suspended the biggest pro-UK campaign group's Twitter account with over 30,000 followers. When it suspended that, Unionism in Scotland took a hit. Now all that we're left with is largely anonymous pro-UK accounts, which are okay for spreading information, but they're not good for much else, really. And also they're just the usual MPs and MSPs with their usual stuff. So we took a massive hit. We're still campaigning against that. We're still appealing against it. Hopefully we'll get it sorted in some way. But the point that I need to make is Facebook and Twitter do need to get sorted. And that's governments that must do that. And our British government has to sort it as well, because we cannot have platforms such as ours being removed for no reason. The only reason that we've received is that we were a fake account, which of course says that nobody's even looked at our account to make that judgment. They've just pressed some button, and zap, ourselves and lots of others have been eradicated, and it's ongoing as well throughout. So I was going to spend a lot longer than that, but we can talk about that every week. We can talk about it every week, but it's really something now that has to kick in, and these companies have definitely overreached at this election. Now, this week in British history, because we love our British history, because the past informs the present, which creates the future. And if you don't know your past, then you don't really know who you are. And that's a problem here in modern Britain, and especially in modern Scotland, where a lot of young people, God bless them, but they've been brought up in a school system that's never properly taught them about their wider British roots and identity and history. So we try to fill that gap as much as possible, and we do it every day on our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and Parler, and also to an extent here on YouTube. Our Instagram page, by the way, 4,250 followers as of last night. So if you're on Instagram, please give that a follow. And our Facebook page is coming up on 30,000 followers. When I looked this morning, we were 42 people off an official 30,000 likes. And when somebody likes it, what that means is our information goes to them every time they switch on their phone. Every time we make a post, they get a notification. So it's important that you like our Facebook page. Now, you can also invite your friends to like the Facebook page. If you go to our normal UK A Force for Good page on the browser, on a computer browser, in the top right-hand corner, you'll see 3 little dots. If you click on that, it will take you to invite friends. You click on invite friends, and all your personal friends will come up. And You can choose which ones that you think would be interested in AFFG, and you tick the boxes, and a message will get sent to them saying that your name invited you to like a force for good. And it's that simple, and it really does work. So that's invite friends on a computer browser. You go to the top right-hand corner where the 3 wee dots are and click on that. And if you're on a mobile phone, look for the community link and click on community, and it'll come up invite friends. Click on that, you'll see all your friends, and you can tick next to your friends. And let's get 30,000 by tonight. Let's get 30,000 by tonight. Linda says, Joe Biden is no friend of our UK. He will always side with the European Union. Yes, that's true. And he's also very much on the Irish Republican side of things, whereas Trump, of course, is on the Scottish-British side of things, his mother being Scottish. In fact, we don't hear that so much. The Scottish media likes to pretend that. They don't like to point out that Trump's half Scottish. Yeah. So this week in British history today, James VI, who created this flag, which you can get as a wee badge, which says a force for good through the middle of it. James VI published his proclamation that he was indeed King of Great Britain, because he didn't want to be called King of Scotland or King of England. He wanted to be called King of Great Britain. And he proclaimed that on the 20th of October in 1604. And today, on the 24th, he published it as a proclamation. There's a wee flag badge up in the links there. Tomorrow, the 25th, in 1854, the thin red line of Highlanders stood firm at the Battle of Balaclava against 2,500 Russian cavalrymen, 200 Scottish Highlanders led by the Glaswegian Sir Colin Campbell. They stood up and repulsed the Russian cavalry. And so the thin red line has become synonymous with British bravery in the face of overwhelming odds. And they've been immortalized in a painting by Robert Gibb, which is quite a dramatic painting of the few Highlanders standing up and repulsing the Russian cavalry that are falling in front of them. And as I said, we have this thing in British history where the idea of the few triumphing over the many, whether it's the thin red line, which was today on the 25th of October in 1854, whether it was Rorke's Drift, the few men who repulsed the Zulu charge in South Africa, or whether it's the few at the Battle of Britain. We're always triumphing over the odds. And also, I mentioned those places, but there was also Agincourt, and Agincourt is also today on the 25th of October in 1415, when a largely English army was led to victory by Henry V against the far superior French. And I mentioned Henry V, and he gets a lot of credit, as he should, but sometimes we forget that, in fact, fighting alongside Henry V was James I of Scotland. So it was James I of Scotland and Henry V who fought together at Agincourt and defeated the numerically superior French army. So that was James I, but that's way back in 1415. On the 26th of October in 1918, Stonehenge was gifted to the public by Sir Cecil Edward Chubb. He was the private owner of the prehistoric monument, but he gifted it to the nation on this day, 26th of October, 1918. Stonehenge, where the demons dwell, where the banshees live, and they do live well. Stonehenge, where a man's a man, and the children dance to the pipes of Pan. Stonehenge, where the cats meow, I would take you there if I only knew how. 5 points to anybody who knows what film that song's from. On the 27th of October in 1854, William Alexander Smith was born near John O'Groats, and he went on to found the Boys Brigade. And I believe, yes, he died in 1914, as I've just mentioned to you, and he's buried in the Western Necropolis in Glasgow. On the 27th of October in 1913, somebody that we should all really be very grateful for, because essentially he taught us how to read. And this is Douglas Keane, who was the visionary mind behind the success of Ladybird books. And many of us, I know, watching this, learned to read from Ladybird books, which are a tremendous British creation. And we've got Douglas Keane to thank for that. And he died in 2008. And on the 28th of October 1664, the Duke of York and Albany's Maritime Regiment was formed, and we know them today as the Royal Marines. That was back in 1664. And on the 29th of October 1618, a great man died, Sir Walter Raleigh. I say he died, rather he expired as a consequence of his head being removed from the rest of his body, because he was quite unfortunately executed. Now, the story behind that is an unusual one, because he was convicted of conspiring against our man James VI, and he was sentenced to beheading. But James VI gave him clemency and effectively pardoned him. But part of the pardon was that he must not create any stooges with the Spanish. He must not get into fights with the Spanish again. And so Walter Raleigh goes, yeah, no problem, mate, gets in his ship, sails around the world again. And some of his men got off at a certain point and attacked a Spanish outpost on the Orinoco River against Walter Raleigh's orders. So Walter Raleigh gets back to Britain. The Spanish ambassador is fuming and demands that James VI carry out the execution. And unfortunately, the diplomatic pressure must have been such that our man James VI did, in fact, say, yeah, go ahead. And Walter Raleigh got his head chopped off, which amazed me when I first read that story. And apparently he was allowed to see the axe which would be used to behead him, and he mused, quote, "This is a sharp medicine, but it is a physician for all diseases and miseries." And according to biographers, his last words were, "Strike, man, strike." So he went out in as much dignity as he possibly could in such a difficult situation. On the 29th of October in 1938, the 6-month British Empire exhibition was opened. No, it was closed. It ended on the 29th of October, and it was the most successful 6-month Empire exhibition of any that was held, and that was held here in Glasgow in Bellahouston Park between the 3rd of May and the 29th of October 1938, and it was the opening ceremony was held at Ibrox Stadium. Now, with the King and Queen in attendance. So some people have asked, Alistair, where can I get this t-shirt that you're wearing? This A Force for Good t-shirt. It's from our Teespring store. Now we'll put up the link to that if you would like this t-shirt. We've also got ones that say Scottish and British. We've also got ones that say Welsh and British, with a half St. George's flag or Welsh dragon. We've also got ones that say British Ulster. And we've also got a range of other t-shirts and hoodies, which you might like. That's up at our Teespring store. Finally, just remember tonight, it is the end of British summertime. If here in Scotland, we have a 2-tier time system. So if you're a Unionist or if you're pro-UK tonight, before you go to bed, remember to put the clocks back 1 hour. Now, if you're a Scottish nationalist tonight, you'll be putting the clocks back 700 years. Okay, so just remember that. That's tonight, the end of British summertime, which is always the last Saturday, Sunday night of October. And then we spring forward in the last Saturday, Sunday night of March, meaning that the days are longer for 7 months of the year and shorter for 5 months of the year. So at least that's something in 5 months' time, which won't be very long. We can look forward to putting the clocks back again and welcoming spring. So folks, thank you for watching. It just remains for me to say, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel if you can, and support our work here. If you get value from it, please consider becoming a Union supporter. Please consider just giving us a one-off donation. Christmas is coming. You want to be maybe thinking about getting your learn on with our wee book for the Union. It's only a £5. And our badges as well that we sell, whether that's this cracking little badge that you can put inside or pin to a Christmas card, or whether it is this one, because we rely upon our merchandise to keep this broadcasting going. And we have a great idea for broadcasting, by the way, that's coming up. I'm not going to tell you just now, I'm going to keep it a secret, but we're going to have a really mammoth broadcasting event, which you're going to enjoy. That will be nearer the end of the year, though, but we're getting rigged up for that right now. In fact, expecting a delivery of a particular tripod in about 1 hour's time. So things are really moving ahead with us here. We are a voice of unionism. We are the voice of authentic unionism. We are Glasgow's campaign group and think tank. So please do support us if you can. We'll be here next Saturday at 1 o'clock. Please do tune in. I want to thank everybody for their comments. Dorothea says, thank you for all your good work. You keep us sane. Well, you keep me sane, Dorothea, as well. So thank you. Goodbye, says Linda. Goodbye to you. Mantis says, best of British. And James says, goodbye from the British Commonwealth and British Canada. Wonderful. And Robert says, God bless the Queen. So it just remains for me to say, folks, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen.